We live in a world that equates being smart with following a system well. If someone holds a university degree, possesses technical knowledge, or can explain complex theories, they're quickly seen as proof of superior intelligence. But we rarely stop to ask what that actually shows. Is it truly a sign of deep thinking, or simply evidence of obedience within a pre-structured path? Much of what we call intelligence comes down to the ability to memorize, apply, and operate within the limits of an existing framework. People are praised when they do exactly what the brain is built for: structuring, storing, repeating. Not when they begin to think from within themselves or break free from what they were taught. The brain is not an oracle of truth. It's a tool, one that recognizes patterns, follows language, and links ideas based on what it has already received. And in our society, that function is rewarded, as long as it serves the system. Education rarely focuses on free thinking or inner discovery. It trains you to be useful, not necessarily to be awake. Have you ever noticed? Sometimes the person sitting right next to you, the one who's never read a single book on the subject, the one who never takes the time to watch or listen when you try to share something meaningful, still somehow believes they're the smarter one? And if you're honest, you've seen it everywhere. Most people, quietly or loudly, believe they're smarter than the person beside them. You could spend years studying something, read 100 books, follow the evolution of an idea through history and context, and they'll skim one article, half listen to a podcast, and walk away thinking they've already surpassed you. It's not arrogance alone. It's how the brain works. The mind is wired to seek logic, but not universal logic. It seeks coherence based on what it already knows. It takes the fragments it has gathered and shapes a version of reality that feels complete. And if someone isn't aware of that process, if they can't step outside that loop for a second, they'll assume that what feels logical to them must be truth. But logic is only as accurate as the foundation it's built on. And when the foundation is shallow, so is the confidence, though it often doesn't look that way. They think they've done excellent mental work because the picture in their head makes sense. But they never ask, do I even have all the pieces? Or am I just solving the wrong puzzle really fast? Now imagine someone like Elon Musk personally trains you for 10 years. He teaches you everything he knows, step by step. Not because you're curious, but because he's paying you and directing your growth. Your memory fills up. Your thinking becomes shaped by his lens. One day you can think exactly the way he does. But does that make you smarter than you were before? No. What you've developed is not your original capacity to think, but your ability to absorb. You've learned to function as an extension of someone else, not to uncover something within you that had no name yet. The capacity was already there. The software changed, but the system stayed the same. Your thinking wasn't liberated, it was restructured. And still, we call that intelligence. We draw distinctions between someone who knows everything about computers and someone who knows everything about flowers. But in truth, both require the same mental activity: observation, retention, focus. The only difference lies in the cultural value we assign. Technology is seen as important, so we praise one and ignore the other. Not because one thinks deeper, but because of the status of what they think about. Real intelligence is not what you know, but what you dare to perceive, especially when no one else does. It's not about reproducing what you were taught, but about recognizing what you were never taught, yet feels undeniably true. And that doesn't live in numbers, systems, or diplomas. It lives in silence, in hesitation, in the realization that following is not thinking. Maybe it's time we revise our idea of what it means to be smart. Not as something earned through obedience, but as something that reveals itself once you stop pretending to understand. We often see the bookworm as the ultimate symbol of intelligence, the quiet student who dives into theories, devours page after page, who seems to know everything about a particular subject. But is that really a sign of deep understanding? What we tend to forget is that this kind of knowledge is rarely broad. It's focused, narrow, concentrated. Someone who has dedicated their life to a single field, a single framework, a single type of language, may excel within that domain. But the moment you step outside of it, something strange often happens. You ask a simple question, just slightly outside their area of focus, and suddenly the answer stalls. There's confusion, or a reply that has nothing to do with what was asked, as if their thinking has wandered off the path of familiar concepts. Maybe you remember this from when you were younger. We were all children once, and in almost every class, there were always one or two of those bookworms. This is not a judgment, not an invitation to mock, just an observation. Sometimes it was precisely those students, despite their high grades, who ended up being tricked by their classmates. Not out of cruelty, but simply because they missed something others could see. Someone would invent an exaggerated story, make up a clearly fake plan, a joke, a so-called deal, and they'd fall for it. Not because they were stupid, but because their attention was elsewhere. Their sharpness was in the theoretical, not in the human game. And that raises an important question. If they were so smart, how could that happen? How could they not see they were being played? How could someone so good at logic completely miss the logic of people? Maybe it's because so much of what we call smart has little to do with life, with sensing, with awareness. Because a brain that knows everything about gravity can still have no idea what pulls you down in a room. A mind capable of building complex algorithms can be entirely blind to the algorithm of human energy, subtle cues, and unspoken truth. True intelligence doesn't live only in the head. It lives in the space between things, in the way you catch a glance, how you understand a silence, how you hear the tone that was never spoken out loud. The bookworm is not less valuable, but it is only one form of intelligence, and this is where it often goes wrong. We see only one side of the spectrum and call that intelligence. But intelligence isn't a straight line from dumb to smart. It's a multicolored field, with different areas revealing themselves in different ways. And someone who excels in one can be completely blind in another. Cognitive intelligence is perhaps the most widely recognized. It's the ability to absorb information, reason logically, and make connections. The classic bookworm usually finds strength here, able to understand structures, follow systems, memorize facts. But place them in a room full of people, and they might not know how to begin. Not because they're weak, but because their attention is drawn to ideas, not to energy. Social intelligence works entirely differently. It's the ability to sense people, read tension, find the right tone in a conversation. The student who occasionally outsmarts the teacher without writing a perfect answer, that's social intelligence. The one who knows when to stay quiet, or when to say something light at exactly the right moment to shift the mood of a group. They may not score top grades, but they understand what's left unspoken. And sometimes, there's more wisdom in that than in 1,000 pages of text. Emotional intelligence is even more subtle. It's not just about recognizing feelings, but knowing how to hold space for them. Knowing when you've reached a limit and honoring that. Being able to name your sadness without amplifying it. To feel frustration without making it someone else's burden. Many people with high cognitive skills stumble here. They can think abstractly, but drown in the first wave of real emotion. As if they understand the formula, but not the water they're actually standing in. Intuitive intelligence is often the most overlooked. It's the ability to sense what cannot yet be explained, to feel a direction, detect an undercurrent, to make a choice that seems illogical, but turns out to be right. Intuitive people often know things they were never taught, not because they're mystical, but because they're tuned into something that lives beyond language. Creative intelligence lives in a different layer altogether. It's the ability to create something new, not from rules, but from imagination. The thinker who breaks systems instead of following them. The artist who reveals something that has no name yet, but is instantly recognized the moment it's felt. This kind of intelligence is rarely measured, yet it forms the foundation of everything that does not yet exist. And then there's a form that's hard to capture in language: existential intelligence. The ability to reflect more deeply on life itself, to ask questions that don't need answers, to hold paradox, to respect mystery. People with this kind of intelligence are often seen as dreamers, or too slow for the world. But they carry a different kind of clarity, a form of awareness that doesn't measure, doesn't try to persuade, but simply sees. And now, let's take it one step further. Imagine treating each form of intelligence as its own system, each with its unique way of perceiving, understanding, feeling, and responding. We gather them all into one room and say to them, "Today you'll all take an exam, one test, one method of measurement. Whoever scores the highest is the most intelligent." And the test? It's written entirely in the language of cognitive intelligence, logical reasoning, factual knowledge, time pressure, multiple choice questions. So what happens? The cognitive thinker feels right at home. This is familiar ground. This is what they've trained for, what has always affirmed their worth. But the socially intelligent person, accustomed to reading nuance in people instead of formulas, quickly realizes their strength has no place here. The emotionally attuned individual struggles with the pace, not because they don't understand, but because they feel something is being forced, and that friction causes them to freeze. The intuitive mind senses what's right, but can't prove it, can't explain it. And in this system, that doesn't count. The creative mind begins to hesitate, wants to reframe the questions, explore other angles, form new connections. But there's no time for that. And the existential intelligence? It stalls on the very first page. Not due to confusion, but because something inside already knows these questions hold no real meaning. And yet, by the end of the test, we're told, this was a fair assessment. The highest score reveals who's truly intelligent. But that's not true. What the test actually reveals is who functions best within a specific model of thinking, a single system we've chosen as the standard because it's measurable, controllable, and easy to reproduce. And as long as we keep calling that the definition of intelligence, we remain blind to everything that moves outside its structure. We keep confusing intelligence with performance, adaptation with understanding, and knowledge with truth. And that is precisely why the world looks the way it does today. We've built a system in such a way that those who fit best within the model, the cognitively strong, highly trained minds, are the ones who rise to positions of power. They are seen as the leaders, the experts, the policymakers, the voices of authority. But that doesn't mean they understand reality. It only means they know how the game works and how to play it well enough to move up. What we often call leadership is little more than well-trained obedience in the right direction. And what we mistake for vision is often just repetition of existing thought patterns, wrapped in complicated language. They know how systems operate, how to read numbers, how to defend interests in meetings. But do they truly feel what's needed? Do they see the human being behind the structure? Do they dare to pause for what doesn't generate profit? Intelligence, in the true sense of the word, requires something rarely found at the top of those hierarchies. Doubt, space for the unknown, honesty about what you don't know, deep ability to feel what can't be captured in a report. And so we live in a world where positions of influence are occupied by people who may be intelligent by the system's standards, but who are entirely aligned with only one way of thinking. That's not intelligence. That's narrowness with a diploma. And the result? We create policies without wisdom. We manage millions of lives through models that don't understand people. We make decisions based on numbers, with no real contact with life itself. And this same structure, this narrow definition of intelligence, has simply taken on a new form in today's world. Nowhere is it more visible than on social media. We live in a time where the most money can be earned not by depth, not by insight, but by performing the dumbest behavior imaginable, as long as it generates views. From the outside, it often makes no sense. What's being said is meaningless. What's being done has no value, and yet it works. Not because it's rooted in truth, but because it knows how to trigger attention. These creators, whether intentionally or instinctively, have picked up on something most of us were trained to ignore. What pulls people in? They don't need to be right. They don't need to make sense. They just need to make people look. And so they play the game. While you, who may have spent decades working hard, staying quiet, doing what's expected, watch them earn in a week what took you 20 years. So then the real question becomes, can we still call them dumb? Or are you the one who followed the rules, stayed polite, kept your head down, accepted the structure without question? Maybe the true foolishness is found in adapting to a broken system without ever challenging it. Yes, they may be lost in some ways. They may lack self-awareness, emotional depth, or even basic clarity. But isn't that the same kind of lost our parents and grandparents carried, only packaged differently? Back then, being normal meant conforming. Now being seen means exaggerating. Both are survival strategies in a world that rewards spectacle over sincerity. So who's truly lost? The one who bends the rules to be seen? Or the one who never questioned them and disappeared? Maybe neither is dumb. Maybe both are products of the same distortion, just wearing different masks. So then comes the question, how do we change this? And the truth is, you can't fix a world like this with a slogan. Not with be kind or follow your passion or any of those phrases we've all heard 1,000 times. Because the structure itself is designed to turn awareness into content, resistance into a trend, and even truth into performance. So what do? You stop pretending. That's where it begins. So maybe the real question isn't how to change it, but how to stay awake in it without becoming it. Because there's no clean fix, no switch to flip, no honest path forward that doesn't begin with discomfort. You see the system, you see how it rewards the shallow, punishes the sincere, how it crowns performers and silences the ones who feel too much. You realize this isn't a glitch, it's the design. So maybe the most radical thing you can do is not to outperform it, but to refuse to let it reshape what's still real in you. To let your awareness remain intact in a world that numbs for profit. Hold on to the parts of you that make no sense in a marketplace, but carry the kind of intelligence that can't be monetized, labeled, or trained. That's not an answer. It's a position, a place to stand quietly, honestly, while the noise goes on. And maybe that's enough. Not to fix the world, but to not disappear in it. Because sometimes not disappearing means standing apart. Not because you want to, but because you don't blend in. They say it's lonely at the top, but maybe it's not the top that's lonely. Maybe it's the thinking. Clearer your mind, the fewer people you'll find who really meet you there. Just like in love, like attracts like. And if your way of seeing is rare, then naturally there are fewer who see like you do. People with simpler thought patterns, not lesser, just more common, connect more easily. They move in groups. They finish each other's sentences. Belong by default. But if your questions go deeper, if your pace is different, if your mind sees from angles others haven't considered, you become harder to mirror. Not less, just rarer. And rare things don't always gather.